Okay, so I'd like to welcome onto the stage our indie developers. So we have Russell from Cando Corp and Alan from Dare the Monkey. So they're going to give us a talk today and give you guys some hints and tips on the industry. They'll tell us a wee bit about their journey. So we'll just pass you on to you guys for a wee bit of 5 minutes chat and then we'll do some Q&A. Thanks, guys. You will?
You'll go first, I took first
I'm
yesterday.
going to stand up today, okay? Can everybody hear me okay? Is that better? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys about starting out making your own indie games. So I think the first thing is you want to come up with a really good idea. So how do you come up with an original idea? Or how do you come up with great ideas? You just steal them, basically. There's no such thing as truly original ideas. There's maybe the odd one, but you'll find your ideas in the past. If you go around this hall and you look at all the amazing games that are on display here today, just take all the ideas you can get from those, study the work of the masters, play Nintendo games, go onto YouTube, watch all the greatest games you can find, and there you'll find inspiration for all your ideas. So once you've done that, you basically want to get your ideas down onto a bit of paper. You want to just start sketching your ideas down. And for a lot of people, that might be as far as you can take your ideas at the moment. You might not actually yet have the ability to take your ideas from the page and get them on the screen. But do you know, that's absolutely fine. If you go into Google and type in Street Fighter 2 original concept art, you will find all the original concept art from that game. And you'll see that it just starts out in a bit of paper. And then when you look at the game, it might change a lot. Some of it might be the same, but someone's formed the basis of the idea of that game on paper. And that's just the best way to start out. If you want to take it to the next stage, you're going to need some tools to actually build a game. So depending on where you're at, if you're a kid and you haven't been to college or university, I would just suggest getting your hands on any games that come with level editors, because you're actually using the tools that the programmers and level editors, level designers use to make the game. And you'll learn so much from looking at their level editors and making your own levels. And I think that's a really, really great way to start out. If you want to take it to the next stage, just type in into Google something like game making software, and you'll just get loads of software that's for people that can't code. And you don't need to code, you just need to get your hands on software, someone's tools that they've already built, and you can use those tools to make games. Now, it might be that your game ideas are quite simple, and I'd encourage your initial ideas to be quite simple. Take whatever games you love. If you love Flappy Birds and you're making an iPhone game, make a clone of Flappy Birds. It's a great way of learning. If you love, I don't know, Super Mario, make a very, very simple Super Mario clone. You will learn so much from doing that. And if you're a really young kid, there are game makers out there for young kids. So just type in game making software for kids. You'll get loads of hits. And obviously once you get to like college, late high school, university level, you're probably looking more at things like Unity, Unreal Engine, things like that. So find the tools that you need to make a game. If you can't code, don't worry about it. There will be tools that let you do the job. If you can't draw, if you're not an artist, go online, go to these pixel blogs. There's people doing amazing pixel art all over the web, and they're not doing anything with them, they're just drawing all this crazy stuff. Email them, ask them if you can use their artwork. You would be amazed, they'll be delighted. If you say, I'm making a game, can't draw, can I use your artwork? Most of them will be like, well, yeah, sure, excellent, this is great exposure. So if you can't draw, find someone that can. If you can't code, find a piece of software that lets you make a game without coding. Can't do any sound, go online, there's free sound everywhere. You can download this stuff, free music, free sound effects, and get your hands on everything you need. The next thing you need to do is create a very quick prototype or demo of your game. You don't want to go away for 2 months, make a game, and then realise this game's terrible. I've just wasted 2 months making the worst game ever. Spend a week or two making a very simple demo of your game, and then ask yourself, is this game fun? Is it exciting? Is it too ambitious? And if you decide at that point that this is the wrong game to be making, chuck it in the bin, start again, try another prototype. but do not move on to your final game until you've made a demo or a prototype, because otherwise you'll spend months and then realise your game's rubbish. If you're quite serious about it and you want this to be a career, I would also suggest run it like a business. So schedule the work, try and have a good work-life balance, understand how much time you're going to spend making your game, how much time you're going to spend watching football or playing video games. Cut out all the stuff that you don't necessarily really need in your life and find a good balance between working and spending time with family and friends. But if you get the balance wrong, you'll just burn yourself out. Otherwise, you also run the risk of never actually finishing the game. Be willing to accept help from others. So if you've got friends who are artists or programmers, cool, that's excellent, but do not rely on them. People are very unreliable, so don't expect your programmer friend to give 100% commitment to your game, because it's your game, not his. And he might say he's going to help you, but he might let you down. So yeah, accept help, but do not expect others to actually get the work done. So another thing a lot of people want to know is how do I fund an indie game? How do I make a game and how do I get funding? You're not going to like the answer. It's probably for most people going to be get a real job. Get a part-time job or a full-time job. Do it in your spare time. Russell will totally disagree with me because he's a businessman. He does this for a living. He'll frown at that answer, I've no doubt, but I'm sure his tactics for making games are probably quite different from mine, because although I'm telling you how I make games, there's no right or wrong way to do it. All you have to do is be passionate, be committed to your project. You have to go all in. There's no point starting something and never finishing it. And trust me, I know I am famous for never finishing stuff. But if you act professionally, treat it like a business, have a bit of passion, do your research, look at the games you want to make, look at the software that's available. If you can't afford 3D software, look for 3D software that's free, Blender. If you can't afford Photoshop, look for an equivalent piece of software which is really cheap or free. Any software you want to use, type its name in and type in equivalent into Google. You will find loads of software that does the same thing for absolutely no money. So you can really keep the cost down. So that's my advice basically. There's far too much to talk about, and to fit it all in here, they'd have to drag me off the stage. So my game, Dare the Monkey, is in the Indie Zone. Come over and have a chat with me, have a shot. I'll tell you everything I know, I'll help you out any way I can, and I'll hand you over to Russell. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
How are we doing? So my name's Russell Anderson. I run a full-time company. We are very different, I believe, to most other companies. A lot of companies, they have a plan what they're making from the start, and they stick to it. We are very different. What we do is we have a 2-week game jam every single 2 weeks that we work. So I now have 5 staff, so they constantly have a 2-week game jam every 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, we're working on an individual project that no one's allowed to see. We bring it in, and then we all play each person's game. And what we do is there's specific rules we stick to. So you're not allowed graphics. You're only allowed to use base shapes, so squares, circles, triangles, rectangles, stuff like that. You're not allowed to put any graphics, so we're not allowed to know what the final actual look of the game would be. All we are able to see is the minimum viable product, which is basically a very small cut of what the base mechanics of the game would be. Therefore, we can tell if it's going to be fun, if we can work with it, stuff like that. And then what we do is, after that, we give it to a couple of other people that we have on a mailing list. They try it for the couple that we choose. If any of them see there's anything in it, then we sort of start working towards it. And then what we do is we build for a month a very basic prototype. If at the end of the month it's not fun, it just gets scrapped. If it is fun, then we put it in the list of to-do games, which, trust me, it's a big list now. But at the moment we're working on Super Undercover Slime Agent, and that's been about a year and a half of full work. on it, and we're quite proud of it. But like I said, our processes are very different to other companies. I've worked for AAA companies and I've worked for very small indie companies as well, and our process is very, very different. As for staff, like you're saying, you can get friends, family and stuff like that. I don't get that luxury, because as soon as I take on anybody, they have to hit payroll and payroll means I need something back from them at the end of the day. You know, if they're an artist, we need to make sure they're producing art on time, on a schedule. So we use Scrum mainly, is the process we use. So we have a big board of all the to-do-dos, and basically we split it up into categories, so programmer, art, etc. And every day, if you're in the art department or you're in the programming department, you come up, you pick up one from the programming section. Could be anything that you see on the board. You take it, you do it, you bring it back, you put it in the completed section. At the end of the day, I go through all the paperwork, make sure everything's okay, and get the next set for the next day or week or however long it's taken for each process. So we do very minimal, small pieces of the game, but we do a lot of it in one day. We generally push a patch out every 3 months for all of our games. So we have stuff on Android store, we have PC games, and as of next year we're also working on console titles. So we're quite excited for that. As for funding, it's a big question that we always get. So when I started, I actually self-funded it. I was quite lucky that I had a good job beforehand, so I could self-fund it for ourselves. But that was when I had 2 people, and it was manageable. Whereas now that we have 5 people, obviously our products are now making enough money that we get a return on them, so we can afford to keep going. And in the past couple of years we've expanded, so we're quite lucky that way. As for how we do our team, we do have offices, although 2 of our team actually don't work in the office because they come from the opposite side of Scotland to ourselves. So we have a big screen that we use in the office, which is actually the same screen that we're playing the game on. So it's a 50-inch screen, so it's quite big. And we have that split into 2 for 2 different Skypes. And basically we video chat all day. So 9 till 5, we're in a video chat. So Skype probably loves us for the amount of times that we promote their service. Because anytime we're in a chat with any big companies, it's always Skype we use as well. And I think for starting out as an indie developer, it's a good tool to use. But you need to remember that, like Alan was saying, if it's friends and family, you can't, although you can work 9 to 5, you can't force it upon them to work 9 to 5 because it's not their job at the end of the day. So you've got to be careful about that. Now, as Alan said, I probably disagree with the way it works, but that's because I'm very business minded. I used to run another business beforehand, and that was really tight as well. So everything I do is always a business decision. And from the ground up, the 4 other guys, they get to weigh in as well. We do it almost like a board. So they get to weigh in on the decisions of the company. But at the end of the day, I look at the stats and figures and I have to make the decision. So it's very different. Ours is a bit, sometimes decisions we make are a bit more stressful, especially we do about 11 events a year usually. At the moment, and some of them we have to turn down at times just because it's not the right time. Our demos, we like our demos to be quite polished, so we always try and make sure our demo is polished beforehand for the stage. But for people learning, definitely use free tools. We can't stress enough how many people go out and they buy a really expensive tool such as 3ds Max or Photoshop or InDesign, then realise they don't know how to use it, or they learn how to use it but it's not to an industry standard, so there's no point in having the tools if you can't use them properly. We would much rather you had really, really good tool utilisation in a free program such as Blender, or I don't know what the is it GIMP? That's
Yeah.
GIMP. That's one of the drawing ones. We'd rather much show that you're really good at that than really bad at Photoshop or 3ds Max. Another thing people don't realise is a lot of people use Photoshop for video game development, but Photoshop, funnily enough, it's in the name. It's ideally used for photos. For 2D games, you should ideally be using Illustrator if you want to go for a high-end package, because it vectorizes all the graphics. Unless you're going for pixel art, then it's a bit of a different situation. But definitely use illustration if you want to go for the high-end package. Makes it much easier for everybody in the long term. The amount of times we get stuff that comes back, we do outsource some stuff, because it's a better business decision to go outsource some stuff, and they send stuff back. Sometimes it's photoshopped and we have to ask them to redo it in Illustrator, just because in Illustrator you can scale everything. Vector graphics, doesn't matter how big or small it is, maintains its composure. Photoshop, you blow it up. For example, if we blew up our banner to the size of this board right now, it'd be so pixelated if it was made in Photoshop. In Illustrator, yeah, well, yeah, we maybe get away with that, thinking it's Minecraft, but if we blew it up to the size of the wall, it'd be even worse. In Illustrator, you could blow it up to the size of the United States of America. It'd still be the same quality, same cuts, so it'd be perfect. So.
Can I get Sean?
So we're competing against the other stages.
To Street Fighter.
Zoom it out. No, come on. Is that me back on?
No, I was just going to do a wee bit of Q&A.
Alright, okay, but I just wanted to pick up on a very quick point that Russell made about the fact that people are working remotely. Is that may actually be the future of the video games industry, because the game Ori and the Blind Forest on Xbox One, Moon Studio, who made that, none of them work together in the one office. We're all over the world, and it lets you pick the best talent from all over the world working together virtually to make amazing games. And I just thought that was a really good point that Russell made.
Thanks, Alan. I suppose that would be relevant for any industry. You could pick up the best team everywhere. So I just wanted to ask you guys a question. For any aspiring developers, obviously people want to know what the best tips are, the easiest tips. I know you've covered some already. Can you give us some tips on, how to kind of get started? But also then, if people want a career in the industry, can you also give them some tips on how to kind of go about that? Do they send in a CV? How do they approach it? So a bit of both. If you maybe start on the development, what's the kind of easiest way, would you say?
Sure. So from my point of view, when you're starting out in the industry, you've got a tough time ahead to begin with. There's a lot of people right now, especially wanting to get into the industry. Good thing is, there's plenty of jobs. Literally huge studios are hiring teams of 200-300 now, rather than just a typical 50-person team. So there's plenty of people. For myself, when we look at applications, I take a CV, and what I do is I look at the name of the person, and I put it on top of their portfolio, and the rest of their CV goes in the bin. Believe it or not, I don't actually care as to what qualifications you have. I don't care where you got it, where you learned it, who you learned it from. What I care about is your portfolio. Your portfolio is everything to us. It shows what you've done in the past, shows what you can do just now, and from that we should be able to work out what you would be able to do over a long period of time as well. So for ourselves, portfolio is the main thing. And in your portfolio, don't be scared to show something from 4 or 5 years ago that you did when you were just starting out. Gives us a good idea where you started, where you've ended up. That being said, when you're creating your portfolio, preferably create it in a backwards timeline. So what you've done just now should be at the front, and everything in the time should go back. That way, as we look through it, the product quality should slowly go down, but it gives us an idea of how your learning curve works. So it's very, very different. But for starting out, just choose a specialisation. If you want to be an artist, what kind of artist do you want to be? if you want to be a programmer, what kind of programmer, what language, what discipline do you want to do it in? If you want to be a programmer in graphics art, just do graphics art. Don't worry about making a full game, just work on the graphics sort of side of things. And you'll find that the skills you'll learn during that to get to that point evens out across other fields. So while you're learning graphics programming, you're not realizing you've learned how to make part of a game already, but you didn't know how to do it beforehand. But graphics programming, or for example, if you're an artist and you're really good at environmental stuff, you'll find that when you're making environments, you start to understand how light works and stuff like that, and you're drawing all these places. But guess what? Light works the same on people. It works the same on objects. So you learn the skills over everything, but choose one thing you want to be really good at. Because in the industry, there's thousands of programmers, there's thousands of artists, but there's, off the top of my head, there's only 50 master cloud programmers in the world. There's probably something like 100 and something master environmental artists. So they've narrowed it right down. If you want the person that's good at that job, you've only got a choice of 100 people, of which I guarantee 99 of them are in a position at the moment. So you're only going to have a choice of 1 or 2 people if you really want that. That's the sort of position you want to be in. Okay, you want to be really good at the one thing so that everybody else can't do it. They don't have a choice. They have to come to you to get the work. Therefore, you've made yourself invaluable to the industry, So Alan probably has a different view, but we'll see what it says.
Well, I agree with practically everything Russell said. Put your best work on your folio at the front, and if there's some work you're not so sure on, just, in my opinion, just ditch it. It's not doing you any favours if you put your best work on. Also, I would like to say, if you're at school and you hate school and you totally flunk out of school, that's not the end of it, and it should never be the end of it, because the work you do in your spare time ultimately is probably what's going to get you a job in the industry. I spent years all through high school just at nights in my bedroom being really sad and geeky, just copying graphics from video games and learning how to recreate those. And by the time I left high school, I had a pretty impressive portfolio. I was playing games on my Commodore Amiga or whatever it was, and I was often dismayed at how bad the graphics were, because I'd become so good at doing it myself in my spare time that I couldn't believe people were getting paid to be so rubbish at it. So I would never discourage anyone from going to university or college. As Russell says, the qualification won't get you the job, but you will learn a lot. So if you go to college or uni and you spend time on the computers in there building up a portfolio of work, ultimately that's what will get you the work. So yeah, just specialise, create your own portfolio of work and apply for as many jobs as you can. Just apply everywhere, and that's basically my advice. Yeah.
Okay, is there any questions in the audience? Does anyone have anything to ask the guys? Any questions?
In your opinion, where do you see the industry in 10 years?
10 years.
If we knew where the industry was going to be in 10 years, we would be rich.
Yeah, so our industry moves at a pace of weekly. I would say, I wouldn't say quite daily yet, but weekly. So to say in 10 years is crazy, but the way we're probably moving towards is working remotely. Like you were saying about was it Forza? Was it Forza that you were saying about they worked remote? Oh, Ori and the Blind Forest, yeah. So, a lot of studios are now starting to get on board with working remote. I know that big teams such as Team 17, huge publishers, they have quite a remote working situation sometimes as well. So I think although a lot of the big studios, EA, places like that, still love their in-house working environment, it's not always the best. Plus, for the smaller companies, it's all about when you've got someone working for you, it's during those working hours you're wanting the best back. And for us, travel time was a big thing. for one of them. Like I said, they stay opposite side of Scotland. Took them a long time to travel, long time home, and then they were getting tired. And you could see it was just burning them out. So it was better for them to just work at home. So we act as if he's in the office on the screen. So it's the same thing. But for me, I think remote environment is going to be the big thing. As for the VR side of stuff, which everybody is in the incline at the moment, I personally think VR is going to be the next Wii. It's going to absolutely everybody and everybody's gran is going to have one, and then nobody's going to play it. I think it's just going to drop off the face of the earth so quick. As soon as people realise they've got to sit down, they've got to set up their computer. Not only that, they've got to have a high-end computer. Then they've got to put it on. Then they've got to calibrate it. Then they've got to load the game up. Then they've got to set the settings, and now you can finally play your game. By that point, you're tired. You want to take the thing off and you're finished. So unless someone comes up with an absolute streamlined version that's wireless, then it's probably going to be the next Wii is the way I see it. But
it's going to be like Guitar Hero with all these plastic guitars building up in people's cupboards. I have no idea where the industry is going to go in 10 years. I would say that long term, if you're in the industry or looking to get into the industry, you always need to be updating your skills. You always need to be on the cutting edge of what's happening, at least viewing it. And the company I work for, we get students in all the time, and they know software that I've never even heard of. And I'm looking over my back because these people are trying to take my job. So you need to keep yourself really relevant at all times. Always be at the forefront of technology, and just be. No one knows where the industry's going to go. No one. We can guess, but no one knows.
I've got a question for you. Who inspired you to be Sings? I don't know if you've ever heard of the Power of Five. Have you heard of the Power of Five? The Power of Five is 5 people that inspired you to be where you are. Have you got a Power of Five, or do you have anybody that inspired you that made you do what you want to do?
So me personally, I have 2. I wouldn't say 5, but I have 2. So the first person, this is going to sound cheesy as anything, but is my dad. But he used to work for Microsoft at the time that Microsoft was getting ready to go under. And when he worked there, it was really tough. You know, they were in constant crunch, basically all the time. He worked long hours, and then when I was stuck at programming, he used to always help to begin with, until I surpassed him, and then he would come home from work and start asking me. And I remember one time we got a phone call from Microsoft because my dad had actually brought the source code home for what he was working on to try and work with me during the night to fix the problem that they had. And they phoned up, asking if obviously the proprietary software and stuff had left the building and stuff like that. And I was thinking these SWAT guys were going to bust in the house and take our computer away and everything like that. But it turned out it was totally fine for them to take it away at the time. We just hadn't marked it down in the book. But I was thinking these SWAT guys were going to break in the house and come and take my dad, and all these computers were going to get burned, and just what you see in like Terminator and stuff like that. I thought it was going to be like end of the world scenario. And then the other person for me at the time would probably be John Carmack, because a lot of people, if you work in the industry especially, you probably heard of him. But at the time that I was young, he was also fairly young. And when he was 15, he wrote the main source code that Unreal still today works on, for lighting and a bunch of other things. And at the time, I thought it was insane, because back then, programmers were classed as these 40-year-old guys that sat in the back of these dark rooms and created this software, whereas to hear that this 15-year-old kid had built the thing that Quake and everything like that had ran on at the time, it was just like insane and mind-blowing. So I thought, I need to be that guy when I'm 15. Sadly, I never got there, but when I was 15, I wasn't too far behind, but obviously the technology had moved on so far at that point. So
I would say that I'm not really particularly inspired by individuals so much, because games, if you watch the end credits to any game that you play, there's hundreds of names. These things are now longer than movie credits. I'm inspired by the teams, just the little guys that were working on it that no one ever knew was working on it. I played the new Tomb Raider game recently, and I just couldn't stop looking around and being astonished at the detail. And I'm always thinking, who did that? Someone I'll never even know. There's so many talented people that maybe never get the chance to be the senior designer or the senior artist. And I'm genuinely just inspired by the teams, by everybody working on the games, especially the people that never get a big shout out. So that's what inspires me.
Thanks, guys. Have we got any questions in the audience? Anybody? Hold the microphone right up to me.
Do you find that with the new console generation, the smaller indie developers actually get more of a chance? You know how Microsoft and Sony are claiming they're kind of getting more into the smaller developer and getting their games published more.
So, sorry, it's hard to hear, but is the question, does the new consoles give indie developers a better chance in the industry? Yeah. We should just get those cards. So, with the new consoles, yes and no. It gives developers a better chance to work, definitely, with the consoles. So for example, you know, it's easier to get a PlayStation 4 development kit or Xbox development kit at home nowadays, or even transform your Xbox into a development kit and then work on it from home. The other part that I said no for is because at the end of the day you still need to be rated, regulated, everything like that. So unless you're willing to take your indie side to a semi-business to a degree, you're still going to have that barrier for entry there. So it's definitely easier to get something on it than it was previously, because you used to have a big publisher. That was the only way you could really get to a console. The other side is you still have to become a semi-business, and you still have to be age-rated, everything like that, before you're allowed to release on the console. But the barrier of entry to start developing on it is a lot lower. So unless you're wanting to take it to a publisher, which is another route to market, then yeah, it's a yes and no.
You get your game on, let's say Xbox One, you're still competing in the same market space as the massive AAA companies like EA, and the amount of budget they can throw at the marketing, you simply can't compete with that. But I would say that I know a studio in Glasgow that made an incredibly good game on the mobile devices. It maybe wasn't monetized well, it didn't make the money it should have. But when they released it on Xbox One, even as a small indie studio, they still made relatively good money, and they didn't necessarily have the exposure that you'd expect them to have. So it is for very small studios, it's still possible to make money. But in terms of marketing, you still need to get it out there for review. You need to contact relevant YouTubers, anyone that can promote your game. And I think Russell will agree with me that marketing and promotion is as important as actually making the game, and it's something many people actually aren't prepared for. And it is a lot of work. The things you have to do, they're maybe not that difficult when you break them down, but it is so much work, and so many indie devs forget to actually assign any time or budget to their marketing. So it is possible, but you just have to be willing to actually promote the game.
So just to add on, for example, you're talking about marketing budget. To give you an idea, Assassin's Creed 3 cost on average 22 million to make. They spent 30 million on their marketing budget alone. So it gives you an idea of how the AAA companies look at their marketing against their development costs. We have to almost do the same, but as an indie developer, we're lucky because we get to one-on-one interact with people. You know, if you go to a huge festival and Xbox are there, it's not the guy that is in charge of Xbox that's actually there. You know, it's a team of folk, and the chances of getting all that information back up to them is very slim. Whereas, you know, we're always at the events personally, so it's much easier for us to get instant feedback. So.
Thank you. Any more questions in the audience?
This is a question for yourself, Russell. You know how there's currently the competition between the consoles about who can have the better technology. Is it hard for your company itself, because you said you're developing some console games, is it hard for yourself to keep up with the demand for the upgrading technology in development with the game?
Could you repeat that last bit again? Sorry.
Sorry. There's the upgrading of the technology where Xbox and Sony are currently in competition about who can have the better technology. Is it hard for your company to keep up with the demand due to the technology getting better so quickly? Is it hard for the game to be developed?
So is it harder for us to keep up with the technology and the new consoles? Yes and no. It's easier for us when they put more stuff in it because we have more stuff to use, especially RAM. We cannot thank them enough for finally putting enough RAM in the consoles that we can actually use it properly. But as for keeping up with it, people expect a lot more. A lot of people don't realise when these AAA companies make a game, they spend months optimising it at the end so it can actually run on a console. When they make it, it'll run like 28 FPS on a console when they're in the whole development cycle. And then at the very end of it, they optimise it right down to run at 60. Whereas for ourselves, we try and optimise it as we go. So it's very different for us because we don't know exactly where our final product will be at the very end, because we don't have a end of line. This is just where we stop and that's it. They can do that because they have the market and the money there, whereas ours, if we market something and it sells 100 units, and then we don't market something and it sells 10,000 units, by year we would go with the 10,000 units, whereas as a big business they would just stop at both. You know, they're quite happy at both. They probably maybe even go for the 100 and push it up, but for ourselves it's very different. But the new console technology, people expect a lot more. But you get a lot more leeway with it as well at the same time. The hardest thing for us at the moment is one of our games that we're working on is cross-platform, and it's hard for us to tell people it works on PC, it works on Android, they can talk to each other, works on console, they can talk to PC, they can talk to Android. However, until Microsoft and Sony sit down and finally speak to each other and stop sitting in opposite corners of the room in a wee huff, we can't do cross-platform between consoles without their consent. So while we have had it running between them and it works totally fine, we cannot actually sell it as a full cross-platform title until they. So there's still barriers again, but hopefully one day they'll realise it's better for them to both have the cross-platform connectivity. Because at the end of the day, I know that they like exclusives because it sells their platform. You know, Xbox is exclusive. There's less and less exclusives nowadays, and the cross-platform could really help both because people are going to play the console they like the most anyway. You're not going to sell an entire console based off whether you can play online with a phone. It's just not going to happen. Unless the next Minecraft or something comes along and does it, and Pokemon Go or something like that goes wild, but it's very few and far between. So.
Thanks. One last question, if anybody's got a quick question, or are we all done? Okay, thanks guys, that was excellent. Thanks so much for your insights. We'll just get your mics off now. Thank you.